Look, trying to get it together. All right, call the capital improvements meeting to order, and we have Mr. Johnny Rome to talk about some change orders.
Good evening. Before you, we have St. Charles Parish Middle School Auxiliary Gym and Fitness Room Project, change order number 1. These are kind of changes we typically like. It is a deductive change order. You can see the items before you in which those changes were made. Be more than happy to explain any of them in further detail. It did result, if approved, this change order would result in a decreased cost of approximately $50,000, $49,348.68 with 0 days added to the project. I did review this request for change with the board president, capital improvements chair, and vice president and superintendent as well. Here for any questions that you may have.
One of those things are the same person, so.
Yeah, that does help. 2 birds with 1 stone. Any questions in regards to the items or the change itself?
Is this just for one school?
This is actually for all 4 middle schools, so it's collective of the project. The project was bid out all as one for, the savings of the economy of scale and timing and such.
Okay, so it's a compilation of the change orders at all the different sites?
Yes, sir, that's correct. Like item number 1, changing from the 26 gauge to the 24 gauge panel is $44,000, so it's approximately $11,000 per site, but collectively it's $44,000. Yes, sir.
Hey, is the permitting cost, is that something that we, is it in the package? I mean, in the bid, and I'm assuming it's all part of it.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's handled differently by architects I've seen it handled many ways on many different projects. Ironically, on the next project, we have a credit for permit fees because the architect on that job applied for the permits earlier, paid for them up front. Of course, you still pay for the fee. That was paid on the architectural side, not on the contractor side. Like I said, you see it both ways. It just depends. Sometimes architects will do it to get out ahead of the project, figure out exactly what the number is, pay it, so then you're kind of out the gate running. Sometimes they put an allowance in there for permits. Sometimes the permit's not put in there until they find out the total amount, and then that amount's paid. So it's really what and what. You either pay for it on the architectural design side or you pay for it on the construction bidding side.
I just saw the credit, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
On the next item.
Yeah,
Right.
yes, sir.
Thanks.
Okay, all right, we'll move on to the second item on your agenda, and we do have Mr. Mike Tabb with Murray Architects, the lead architect on a project representing the firm. This change order is for the St. Charles Parish Public Schools Elementary School Auxiliary Gym project, restrooms, water stations, and storage included. You see the changes there before you. The permit fee being one that we just talked about, acoustical ceiling tile credits, some other various credits in parentheses, and then additional expenditures not in parentheses. But the total change is a decrease in cost of $109,737.31 with 0 days added. I do want to point out one thing before I open it for any questions. There is a credit on this one for construction plaques and the amount of $47,100. 2 reasons I want to point that out. One, we saw the cost of those and thought it to be, quite significant. So doing our due diligence and looking over everything cost-wise, cost feasibility-wise, we solicited what a potential credit would be for that, and then went to some local vendors to see if they could produce the same plaque or a very similar plaque that was scoped out, and we were able to achieve that at a cost of about $30,000. So I wanted to point it out in the sense to show that we are getting a credit, we are doing our due diligence, but the true credit there is net savings of $17,000. So on this ledger, the total credit is $109,000, but the true savings there is $80,000 and some change. So at this point in time, we'll just open it up for any additional questions that y'all may have.
Thank you.
John, do we have to have the plaques? Like, is that?
It's in our policy
It is
to
our
have
policy
plaques.
to have
Yes.
plaques,
Yeah. So we were looking for the most cost-effective way. Two things. One, obviously, this job has 9 plaques in it, so the cost is magnified there. When it's within the job, basically the contractor is going to farm out that work or subcontract it, and then we're going to pay that plus their overhead. So we felt, to do our due diligence, it's best to remove it and then one, see if we can get it cheaper, but also not paying that premium just for them to arrange it, which we can do ourselves, and we look to take that approach going forward, so. Any other questions?
If there are no further questions, we adjourn capital improvements.
Thank you, Ms. Mike. Thanks, Eddie. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, that brings us to the Personnel and Policy Committee. Meeting is called to order. First item on our agenda is a employee discount and financial wellness program update. Teresa Brown is here.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Good evening, everyone. So this item is to bring 2 programs to you. One that is the financial wellness program, the Smart Dollar program, and the Access Perks program. Access Perks, you'll see 2 documents attached to this agenda item. Access Perks was established here in February of 2021, and the Smart Dollar program was in June of 2023. So we've had these programs for a few years, each of them. I do think that there's a lot of value in them. However, given our current, realignment of priorities, I'm bringing this to you as a recommendation to discontinue at the, board's discretion, but I wanted to give you an update on Access Perks. It provides a little bit of information about what is the monthly cost. The annual cost is $16,800, and there are some utilization data points there for you to review, just in their registration, the number of people that may participate in the program. Every employee is eligible, but it does vary from 150 to as many as 500, depending on what they're looking for and the benefits of the discounts. Most popular, of course, being travel, retail shopping, restaurants, automotive services, and fitness. But overall, when we're looking at the cost of this program, and then with the Smart Dollar program, the cost of that program, just looking to reallocate those resources to whether it be recruitment, retention, or just some other priorities. So we're bringing this to you for your consideration for the board table for Wednesday, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you may have regarding either of these programs. That's not included in this summary already.
Are there any questions? Okay.
No, but Ms. Brown, I would like to thank you because I love the way the format is given to us with the utilization summary, the benefits, consideration. So I do appreciate that at a glance because, if I had to do that myself, it would take a long time. But I like the way you compiled all this information on both of them, the Smart Dollar and this. So thanks a lot.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the feedback. Mr. Cody?
And I just want to say I appreciate the effort of trying to find some savings where we can. But considering the amount of financial debt that not just our employees, but just the United States population in general is in, these financial wellness programs, I believe, are probably too beneficial to cut at a cost of only $4,500 a year. Did I read that right?
Yes, sir. There are 38 employees that are participating. It is a limited number of invitations, and it was built that way to be, cap off, it's first come, first serve. We do have some employees that do repeat, once we have new people that have said, I want to participate, if there are still spots available, we do allow someone to repeat because they do have some benefit. I will tell you that some of our other vendors that we do deal with may offer some free services, and I am looking into that so we can provide something for our employees. That way, those that do want to participate in something, it's not going to be the Ramsey Smart Dollar. It's a premium program. I'm not going to disagree with you there. It really has, I can tell you the feedback from the employees has been great.
And I guess that's where I'm coming. I see a benefit much greater than $4,500. And so, this would be something that I would want to keep, is where I'm going.
I feel that, and I appreciate what Mr. Cody's saying, but there's so many things out there that if people wanted financial help, they could easily go through their bank, credit union, any place at all. So it's not necessarily something that we have to offer at a cost. I feel like there's other avenues that people that truly want to get out of debt, that they can reach out and get some help somewhere else. I really do. I know it's a very low cost, but I feel like you can get this at other areas of different other venues, like you said.
And specifically, Dave Ramsey has a free app that people can download and use it. Like, there are resources there, budgeting resources. Lots of people host these classes. You just buy the book. Like, there is access to this. I understand his point and wanting to make sure we're giving a lot of opportunities, but this one specifically, I'm still saying thank you for removing it.
How many, I'm sorry, we finished?
You're fine, I'm done.
How many people, you said 30? 'Cause I think it might be on here.
Yeah, 38 people this year. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one, look, Mr. Cody, I agree that I think it's needed. My only question is, and kind of what I brought up when this actually came about, I want to say it was 2023, if I'm not mistaken, but that it really, I felt like it should have been opened up to others. Now, we'll say that there is one of the people on our, one of the organizations that that offers the 403B service. I think Edward Jones has something, I believe. And it might, and I know there's other free ones out there, but I don't know the differences, but I would ask that maybe and you kind of alluded to it, just something that might be free that they can sign up for, you know.
Yeah.
But Dave Ramsey stuff is really good.
Yes.
Anybody else? If not, we move to our second item is Ochsner's digital medicine renewal.
Yes, sir. So the Ochsner Digital Medicine, this item, as you know, at our last retreat, this was coming to you for your, decision to determine whether we renew or not. If you do decide to renew, there is the wellness credit that has been included there. And I will answer any questions that you may have. That's the only change that we have there. I think Mr. Babin mentioned it at the board retreat that we had most recently. So we will leave that for your decision on Wednesday night to determine where we go from there, and we will handle that accordingly.
How can this wellness credit be, can the wellness credit be applied in any other capacity to our bottom line of our health costs?
I can certainly explore that with UMR.
Was it just allowed to be earmarked for this?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
We have other options that we can spend this money on. If you all choose not to spend it here, we will
Okay.
find another
Okay.
way to spend it to make sure that it goes to our employees and for the wellness of our employees.
Okay, making sure it wasn't, everything has a string attached to it that says you can only do this or you can only pay for that. So if it doesn't, I just needed to know that before we decide.
And there are some parameters, but there are a lot of options, and we will explore those options, and we can certainly bring those to the board for your discretion.
Have we used the credit from UMR yet?
We used, if y'all remember, this November, we did our Wellness Day, and we did our Wellness Initiative to really drive the PCP campaign, drive our employees to their primary care physician. And so this paid for our wellness shirts that everybody was able to get. So it was an incentive to drive them to do that. And we can certainly spend it similarly to that, but there are other options that we will do in order to make sure that we are maintaining a strong a strong wellness program for our employees.
So a very little bit, Ms. Oakley.
I think, do you know, and if you don't know this answer, it's fine. Do you know if we decide to extend this as a board, does it still end March 31st, or is it would be a year from when, June, July 1st, whatever?
So that is really our discretion if we want it to end, and I think it will, the current contract will be reviewed and it's normal 3-year renewal, the UMR. We will be looking at all these programs and it can end in March.
Yeah, because remember, I think if I'm going back to like our March sometime in March, you and I had a discussion about this, and I remember asking, like, when's it end? And
Yeah.
just if we, I guess my thing, and I kind of mentioned superintendent, is just if we do extend it, can it align to the dates of all the other renewals? And if so, let's bring it back to us in enough time to be fair to you and your team to be able to operationally handle it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't expect miracles,
Yeah.
although y'all do perform some.
Well, thank you. It can align with that timeline. We can do the end of March, we can do the end of April. And that way, we would know in advance and enough time, if we had to transition people from that program, we would be prepared to do that and come to you in enough time if that was the decision of the board.
Dr. Orling, I would just say whatever makes sense to align with, if everybody else, if they decide to approve based on, the approval, we understand when it ends.
Ms. Brown,
Yes,
tell me about the wellness credit. When does it end, the option to spend it? At the end of June 30th or at the end of December?
So I would like to follow up with that question and get clarity. I would assume that it would have to be at the end of the program. So if the end of the renewal for UMR would be end of April, if that is, and I would want to see clarification, that's when the credit would end, but I would like to follow up with that information.
So this credit would be for the coming year, not the current year?
Correct. That's the way I understand it from Mr. Bavin.
Okay, and we have used the credit already for, let's say, the 25-26 school year?
Yes, sir. We have used, I did ask for clarification because to Mr. Oakland's question, it was approximately 11,000 for the shirts. So there is a balance remaining. I would like to see clarification to understand, is that mean that we only now get the 100, like where's the carryover?
Yeah,
Is there
would
carryover?
you-
And I will make sure that we follow up with that.
Please find that out and get that information to us as
Yes, sir.
soon as possible.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Well, I was going to say, it's a really good question. And your question, I guess, leads me to, if we had $80-something thousand left over from assuming it's May 1st, April 30th, if we had 89,000 left over from the previous, and then the 100 starts over again, then it could potentially pay for the whole thing. If I'm understanding, 89,000 left, or 80-something thousand, whatever the number is, plus 100, right? If you can find out,
We'll
thank
get
you.
clarification on that. Thank you for your questions.
All right, next item, personnel items.
Okay, shifting to personnel. So you have two items, two attachments. One is our staffing update that we do monthly through the month of July. And you can see that we are, if you're looking at that attachment, for the 25-26, we've had 37 resignations and retirements to date. Well, I'm sorry, there's an error there. It says 5/8 of 2026, but that is of today, June 22nd. Of the 37, we've had 13 resignations or retirements for special education. We've had a total of 50, which includes the 37 and 13 other positions, and you see those other positions listed out below. And then we always give you a recap of hiring. We've had 16 hires from job fair. We have currently actively working on 13 vacancies. We have our position by position review, which we're looking at those. So these are still active positions that we're looking to fill. And then we have, of course, our 37 resignation and retirements as it's listed above. So this is our staffing update for June 22nd. And it is as of today, because we did a good bit of updates today. And then any questions on that item?
You have 37 resignations / retirements. How many of that number is of each one of those?
I don't have that information in front of me, but I will get it for you and make sure that I follow up to the exact number of retirements versus resignation.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
And that's updated through current date, right? You were saying you corrected the date of 5/8, so it's updated currently.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
To June 22nd, we updated it today, actually.
Okay, item D, revisions to, you were finished? revisions to board policy and procedure 3.01, budget annual operational budget. First reading. Mr.
Good evening,
Davis.
everyone. Just a quick follow-up, and this is we're moving to official movement for first reading and then eventually second reading. This is the first of the three budget items that we've been discussing as a board retreat. This is the first tranche, if you will, of the policies and procedures that are being updated. I do want to give you a heads up with this new format. Thank you to Ms. Kelsey Hagel for helping implement or show how to implement these changes. So if you want to take a look and click into the first item, you can scroll down to the bottom and see them on a side-by-side or comparative basis. You can see in the attachments there's those little drop-down arrows. You're able to pull up new tabs and see the comparison between the existing adopted version and the proposed changes. And it does the highlights and it shows the changes of the very specific wording that we're adopting. As we reviewed in board retreat, this first policy, 3.1, is mainly around codifying a lot of the language or the legal requirements that were necessary. We had used it a lot in historical, like a procedure or procedure manual. This is bringing a lot of that language into policy as well as procedure to really codify the statutory requirements in terms of timelines and various deadlines and what you're required to submit to the state. It's putting that language in official policy and procedure. Does anybody have any questions about how to review that so far before we get moving? Can you,
Questions?
y'all can see, can y'all see the comparative?
No, I can't.
Yeah, if we can get Ms. Hegel to pull it up, that way you can see.
Yeah, I tried doing it.
All right, so super quick, so you can.
Click it.
In just that item, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you see both the policy and the procedure across the bottom. That little arrow next to it, if you compare the draft with the policy.
It opens a new window.
Yeah, me either.
I have the icon, but I don't have the drop down.
Are you logged in or in public?
I'm logged in. I'm logged in, and I don't.
You should, even if you click on it, it'll open it.
She'll look at, sometimes that's the rights, depending on how it's set up, so she'll look at that. But if we could keep it pulled up, very similar to how administration used to provide a copy with the red lines and the black lines. Now this is all accessible here, which makes it very convenient, yeah. She's gonna check Ms. Ellis to see if it's just a rights thing by each person that she's gonna set up.
Oh, you don't even have an arrow.
That's what I'm saying.
You don't know.
We don't have an arrow.
This side.
I guess maybe while she's doing that, do you mind hitting some highlights of what changed?
Why do they have an arrow and we don't have an arrow?
Becky
Weber gets everything.
Only the Indians have arrows.
Everybody loves Becky Weber.
Alice, Ray, Cameron, and Scott, you don't either?
No.
Okay, again, just some high-level highlights of at least the 3.1 policy. We'll start with the policy, first reading. Again, going through the bullets, the previous version really talked about the expected revenues, expected expenditures, et cetera, and before the 15th day of September. This really kind of gets into the details of the adoption process, exactly what that looks like from the board's perspective, how you go before the public, how you go before in terms of like the reading of the budget and things of that nature. So this first policy kind of walks through and adds that additional language in terms of codification of best practices into the official policy, where this has been more of a behind-the-scenes manual documentation. This is bringing that type of documentation forward. So on the revision, it proposed, in so many words, you have to submit to the state superintendent no later than September 30th. That was not officially in the original version. It also goes into the detail of the superintendent's role in the process of the budget and how historically it's been under the superintendent. This also expands in terms of and her designated members of the staff. So that's the expanded budgetary process that we've been reviewing these last few months. The more engagement, really bringing a lot of that information and really putting it into the policy itself instead of like a behind-the-scenes procedure manual, if you will. So this brings a lot of that forward. From there, it kind of goes into more detail about the notice that's required. We talked about the notice in the past few weeks in terms of, making sure that everyone's aware of the notices and all the advertising that you have to do. So it really, at the policy level, it brings a lot of that best practice language into a consolidated place for the board's approval. The procedure gets a little bit more in the weeds. Once you get in a little bit more, it gets into exactly the basis of the budget. Well, what type of accounting measures are required, what sort of message you include, and things of that nature. So the policy is more high level in terms of your deadlines and timelines of advertising, and your procedure in this situation is a little bit more about what's actual in the proposed budget going forward. Again, these are just clarifying. The previously existing procedure was actually just a reference to a budget manual, which, like I said, we're going to implement that more into the policy and procedure directly instead of relying on a separate manual for this process. It will be supported by one, but it's not going to be like the primary procedure document for the policy. Any questions about 3.1?
Is there any way, I'm trying to follow between two different screens here, or two tabs in the screen here. Is that printable? Because I guess one of my questions, just looking at 3.01 annual, the budget, the policy, right? I think so, yes. 3.01 budget, annual operating budget, policy 3.01, item 4, last sentence, in those instances when the board approves expenditures not previously approved in the budget is thereby amended by the board's action. And again, maybe it's on another, in the procedure part. How are we going to know, and I'm just trying to think in the future here, how will we know if it's not included in the budget? In other words, does the department or someone have to tell us if it's not, and do they have to bring the amended budget at the time? I'm going back to past practices, because what we did was wait till the end of the year, right? Is my understanding.
That was the historical practice, yes, sir.
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out, like, what is that? Trying to wrap my head around what that looks like, what that means.
The new procedures actually spell out the specific situations that could cause an amendment to be triggered. And it's not based on the end of the year. That's just kind of our best practice, because in the grand scheme of things, that's where historically you'd see the most fluctuations. There's actually, if you go to the procedure document, the new proposed bullet V, it talks about the trigger of various changes. Amended budget usually occurs when actual revenues fail by 5%, actual expenditures fail by 5%, total beginning fund balance fails to meet by 5%, which is what we did recently with the second revised. If you remember, we had that discussion and the proposal there. A significant change in operation of which the original adopted budget was developed has occurred.
Which procedure are you on?
It's 3.1R, so that next attachment.
Okay, all right.
So the proposed language there, again, codifies those specific situations. So there's 5. Actual revenues, actual expenditures, the fund balance changing, any additional change or disruption in operations, which as soon as those are made aware, we come before the board for a revision. And the last but not least, if you have received any of the notifications, that's when we trigger and we start the revision process. So if something significant has happened, we do not have to wait to the end of the year officially. That has just been our best practice because of various things of that nature. I know in the past there have been revisions proposed at interims or stopgaps where something has changed legislatively that we had to adopt and change more currently than waiting to the end of the year, like a one-time or a mandated raise or things of that nature. Something that was beyond our legislative or our direct control, or something that arose outside of.
Well, that's what I was thinking, kind of like what we could be dealing with here soon,
That could be a
potentially.
possibility, yes,
Right.
sir.
That's like the more immediate, and I'm not asking for that reason. This is a general, like, trying to,
Yes, sir.
picture.
Any
Thank
of
you.
those circumstances could trigger that
Yeah,
type of.
that's all.
Something else, obviously, that we're doing now from the department and the school level, we'll be conducting quarterly budget review meetings where we'll be reconciling expenditures versus what was originally budgeted for. That wasn't done on a quarterly basis at the department and school level. That will take place moving forward as part of our overall process. So we'll be checking those on a quarterly basis, as much reconciliation as we can then to compare it against the actuals. To your point, Mr. Gregson, we'll identify areas where we're either falling short, spending too much, or hopefully under budget in some ways.
Got it. Thank you.
for clarity,
Refresh.
that same bullet goes into the detail about the budget to actual report that is currently presented on a monthly basis. So we will continue to provide that information. Any questions on 3.1 before we move forward?
Refresh for those of y'all who don't have it, the side-by-side.
Okay.
Refresh your browser.
Refresh your browser.
Hit this circle right there. Sorry. That's okay.
Sorry, guys.
No, no worries. That helps. Thank you.
Good. All right, I'm gonna give everybody a minute or two to look at this, and before we move on, if there might be some questions. Next item is the revisions to Board Policy 3.01.01, curriculum-driven budget and process, first reading.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Again, similar to what we discussed in terms of the board retreat review, this is, again, another comparative. I'm hoping the comparatives works for everyone this time. You can kind of see some proposed language. This is just to the policy only. There is no supporting procedure for this one. This was just adding some additional clarifying best practice language to make sure that when we are focusing on a curriculum-driven budget, AKA prioritizing our instructional needs, we want to make sure that we're considering all sources of that funding, to make, federal grants, state grants, et cetera. That language was not officially mentioned in the previously existing policy, so this language is going to kind of move that forward and codify that language, just so that in the eyes of the board, all of those types of options are presented.
Mr. Davis, do you have an example of what this item would have prevented in the last year?
No, sir, not at this time. I don't have a specific example I could tell you.
Don't have it.
No, this is going to basically help a lot of our going forward procedures in terms of how we've developed a lot of our budgeting process and revised that to have much more engagement from the executive staff as well as schools and things of that nature. So this is going to be a more comparative and monitoring process on a go forward basis.
Okay. Anybody else with a question on?
Sorry, so this is only adding 4, 5, and 6?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay, we'll move to next item on our agenda, item F, Policy and Procedure 3.01.02, General Fund Reserves, first reading.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ellis. Again, this is a similar one that was proposed back at the board retreat a few weeks ago. There was one small change that was proposed based on review of executive staff. I just want to bring everyone clarity. We have split the original proposal, which was to bring this all forward as a policy. We have split it into two pieces. We have condensed and made a more abbreviated bullet as the policy and then expanded upon the more detail in our procedure. And the procedure really gets into the detail as we've been discussing about the general fund reserves, the 17%, how you kind of monitor and maintain that general fund balance on a going forward basis so that you are truly, in so many words, in the eyes of best practices, monitoring and being fiscally responsible. So the language that you can kind of see, again, the policy is the first example, and then the procedure is the attachment. You can hopefully see that we're proposing a split between the two. The language, like I said, in the policy is very condensed, that we will do our best practice and work with the superintendent to revise and make sure that policy is monitored and maintained. And then the procedure gets into the detail of exactly what that monitoring looks like and the steps and the action steps that the board can request the superintendent and the CFO to rectify any sort of concerns.
Any questions? If there are, go ahead, Ray.
I didn't get a chance to read the changes, that's why. What if, and I guess I'm looking more, I mean, it could happen any year, but I'm sort of thinking more along the lines of this year. What if we're not at 17%?
Okay.
I mean, it's possible.
Absolutely. When you start getting into more of the detail in the new proposed procedure, it does talk about, like I said, the recommendation of that 17%. The fourth bullet actually talks about your next steps. If at the end of any fiscal year, the actual amount falls below that required level, the superintendent shall prepare and present to the board a plan for expenditure reductions and/or revenue increases. That plan, as a part of the annual budget review, the board shall review and, if necessary, amend that plan. So you do have cooperative feedback in terms of that next steps. So that the fund balance shall be replenished within 1 to 3 years of use. So it does specify that we as a executive team, if that concern is not met, our level is not met, we need to come back and present a plan to the board to rectify that situation within 1 to 3 years, both from a revenue and/or expenditure perspective.
And that's going to be expected quarterly now? Or that's just going to be yearly?
I couldn't hear you, Mr. Dr. Rowling.
No, this refers to your general fund balance at the end of a fiscal year.
The end of the fiscal year has to be
Correct.
17%.
Correct. And that's
Before we
been
move
our
to the
standard
next.
procedure per se, but it's generally recommended. So at the end of that fiscal year, should we not be or not have that balance, we'll present a plan to the board. We will be required to. And obviously very similar to what we're doing now with our fiscal stability plan. So we would be required to bring that to the board for approval.
Thank you, Dr. Rowling.
What does 17% look like for our district? Like, what is that, if you're comparing that to, why is 17% what?
It's just a good general accounting practice relative to the 17% or 2 months of operating costs.
Yeah.
So general cash flow for 2 months to operate is what you generally should save for in your general fund balance.
And the 2 months is basically 1/6 a year, which is why it's 17%. And that's the minimum standard. Obviously, there are certain guidelines in terms of maybe a hurricane prone or various other disaster areas.
Well, that's why I'm
That's the
asking that,
minimum
because when we
expectation.
talk about rainy day fund, which seems to be talked about a lot, rainy day funds might not matter as much to somebody else, but they matter significantly here.
Understood.
I mean, we had literally just last week
Yep.
had to use our rainy day, so it is 17% enough for a district that is right next to a river that is also,
Understood. That's why right now the language says minimum, so our expectation would be to get back to a meet and exceed so that we have continuing fiscal responsibility going forward.
yeah, future.
Your point is well taken, because after Ida, it really served us well. I think Dr. Ortling can attest to that. Comparatively to other districts who had to borrow money after a major hurricane, we didn't, because we had a sufficient fund balance.
Sit and wait,
Yeah,
and then it costs.
exactly, and you can get our schools open a lot quicker.
I mean, I recall, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
I just recall the same conversation, and just correct me if I'm wrong, but in the 38 range was kind of good for us. Because that was what we were way up here. We were told to be in the 38 to 40 range, which prompted some of the decisions that we made, and that was a safe number.
And actually, we've talked around the 50 million point. To Mr. Suffren's point, when we experienced Ida, it cost us approximately $52 million for total recovery. We were able to draw from our fund balance at that point. So 50 million. And at the time, we actually went and looked back. We did make a proclamation. So this was a question that you all asked at the last board retreat relative to financial support for systems that may be impacted by a hurricane. We would have, and we did at the time, we didn't use it, but we at least the board made a proclamation or a resolution it basically opens up about $50 to $60 million worth of recovery money should you need it. And I know Mr. Neighbors talked to Mr. Akers today about that, if you want to kind of talk about that, because he shared that with me today. We wanted to update y'all.
As a part of the board retreat a few weeks ago, that was one of the questions in terms of, how would we get that additional financing if in where we're at fiscally in cash position, if something were to happen between now and the end of the calendar year, because of where we're at in terms of the timeline of things, what would be options for us? And that was one of the options that was proposed. And that's why Dr. Orling, I mentioned to him in terms of the authorization that was granted and approved, but we did not end up drawing on it. So we do have some of those options at our disposal if we need to seek to pursue them. Let's hope not.
Any other?
Yeah, I have one question. Mr. Neighbors, let me commend you and the superintendent for the updated policy recommendations. There's one thing that I'm concerned about, though, that I don't see here, and maybe it's because I missed it, but new technology and other kinds of things really impact the operation of the school district as it relates to its finances. And I think that we fell behind in keeping up with that. What provisions do we have in the new policy changes and recommendations that require a perhaps updated policy review and procedures for changes to make sure that we're current? I believe that some kind of an annual policy review, procedures review, and what have you would assure the board that we are in fact keeping up with the changes as they occur technologically, as state laws change, and all of these other kinds of things. I think that it's appropriate to codify that in the policy and procedure. Who are the people who would be involved in that process? And I'm not talking about an audit. I'm talking about strictly policy and procedures review to make sure that those policies that we have in place and the procedures that we have in place keeps us current.
We can certainly add that in the policy. Mr. Neighbors can, excuse me, codify that in the procedures to conduct a review of specific budget policy and procedures once a year and bring that report back to the board. Right. We'll get additional feedback from the Finance and Audit Committee, Mr. Neighbors, just to make sure that we know exactly what they want codified on. But I have a good idea, Mr. Smith.
And just to confirm my thinking, just for the budget area in general, or are you talking the entire?
I'm talking about the entire finance and audit. I mean, not finance and audit, but financial operations.
Okay. All right. Yeah. We can review and come back with you on some of that.
Mm-hmm.
Just for clarification, and it may be in here since I just got the green highlighted version. So forgive me, because I do try and read things in advance. The 17% that we're referring to, is it 17% of the all expenses, recurring expenses, or just all, because you get some one time, some, is it per fund?
Per all of the general fund expenditures.
Okay.
At the end of the year.
And that's based on that year, so like, whatever the expenses are for that year in the general fund, okay.
That would be your expectation,
nothing
so
to
that
do-
you have a reserve for next year.
Right, so we're not comparing revenue. Okay, just making sure, thanks.
Any other questions for Mr. Neighbors? If not, all of these items that we just discussed will be on the agenda tomorrow night, at tomorrow night's board meeting. And if there are no other questions or input, The Personnel and Policy Committee meeting is adjourned.
Finance and Audit Committee is called to order. We have 5 items on the agenda. The first item is the official journal for fiscal year 26-27.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, if there's no objection, I would just like to suggest maybe we move the first 2 items and item F, accounts payable, to the board meeting agenda for tomorrow evening. The official journal, the only publication that qualifies, of course, is the Herald Guide, so there's not much discussion needed for that item. And then the resolution canvassing the election returns, that's pretty straightforward. So if there's no objection, maybe we can just move those 2 items in accounts payable to the meeting for tomorrow evening.
I would have no objection to that unless some of the other board member would have some objections, and we would consent those 2 items. Okay.
Those 3.
All right, then let's go to item C, which would be the Eisner AMPA report.
Yes, Ms. Smith, we have Mr. Tom Frew from Eisner AMPA here. We sent all the reports to the board within the last couple of weeks. Asked for additional feedback here. Mr. Tom is going to just provide a general overview of phase 1, 2, and 3, which we had discussion of at our last board retreat, and be willing to answer any questions. Mr. Neighbors is here as well for a response relative to the 3 phases. So, Mr. Tom.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've got some prepared remarks about the reports, and then I'll take any questions you have. To the extent that I can't answer a question, I'll just ask that you provide it to Mr. Neighbors, and then we'll respond in writing to answer your questions and get whatever questions you have answered. So, okay. So my name is Tom Frew. I'm with AAG Gulf Coast, which is part of Eisner AMPA. Over the past few months, we've been working with the district staff on a 3-phase review of the district's funds, its cash, and its financial outlook. I want to begin by clarifying what the nature and the scope of the work was. This was a consulting engagement performed in accordance with applicable American Institute of Certified Public Accountants consulting standards. So it was not an audit, and it was not designed or intended to detect fraud. Across the 3 phases of our work, we did not identify any indications of misappropriation of funds. Based on those results, a forensic audit was not performed. We did not issue an opinion or provide assurance. What we did was analyze the district's own records, report what we observed, and offer practical recommendations to strengthen financial management going forward. So we had a 3-phase project. Phase 1 asked a simple question: does cash reconcile? Is liquidity intact? Phase 2 asked why the numbers look the way they do, what accounting practices sit behind them. And phase 3 looked forward, where the district's cash is heading over the next 2.5 years. So I'll take each phase and kind of walk through what we did and what steps the board and administration have already taken in response to those reports. So phase 1 we issued in March was a cash and liquidity review. We reviewed the district's bank and book balances as of 12/31/25, and we covered pooled cash, the self-insurance account, and all the investment accounts. So the overall results were positive. The reconciliations generally tied to the general ledger, and the combined reconciled bank statements agree to the combined general ledger balances. We did flag a few items for follow-up. So we had a small variance in I think it was the LaFawn Performing Arts Center account that had some unrecorded interest income of about $13,000. That was the only unrecorded item we found. And then we reviewed outstanding checks as of January 31, 2026. Those outstanding checks totaled about $248,000. There was one single check from 2022 that amounted to $84,000 out of the $248,000. So the recommendation here is just a periodic review of outstanding checks, just to make sure things aren't getting stale, and maybe they may need to be reissued or escheated. But again, not a big balance of outstanding checks on the volume of checks that are written by the district.
And Ms. Tom, if I could just pause you just for a second. And from that standpoint, we typically review those once a year. There's a process with our internal auditor that reviews those outstanding checks. Their recommendation is basically to do it over shorter periods of time. So we do perform a process and have a procedure relative to those checks. Just ours is not every 3 months, but that certainly we're looking at all those recommendations relative to those changes.
And then lastly, restricted debt sinking fund tax collections appear to have been applied towards the general fund. So we'll talk about that in phase 2 here. So we also noted that while pooled cash reconciled in total, it was not being reconciled down to the individual fund level. And so that theme, kind of this fund level visibility, is kind of prevalent through all 3 phases. So phase 2, we looked at the fund accounting and budgeting, and that was issued in April. And so we reviewed general ledger activity, transaction by transaction, for a 13-month period, and compared actual results to the board-approved budget to the extent that we could, fund by fund. So a few things stood out. Mentioned just a second ago, nearly all of the district's cash flows through a single pooled general fund account, with the other funds trued up only through journal entries at year-end. So before those entries are made, it's difficult to assess the true fund cash position of each fund. And then second, the approved budget had been entered into the system as one lump sum annual figure, and in places, the figures in the system no longer match the approved budget. So that made it, that makes it difficult to monitor performance if the budget's being changed that's been approved. Third, capital project spending, we noticed that only after 7 months, capital costs had reached $28 million versus a $25 million full-year budget. So that was roughly 7 months, I believe, 6 or 7 months of spending. So that's something that I know one of the recommendations is to tighten up the review on that, and I know that the district has implemented those changes. And we also noted that property tax revenue was running about 11 million short of what the budget was. I think it's coming in better than that for fiscal 26, but at the time, that's what it appeared to be. So I want to stress once again, even through this review, this phase 2 review, nothing we've looked at indicated any misappropriation of funds. Had we come across anything that made us question something, we would have recommended a forensic audit to the district. So without seeing that, it just didn't seem necessary to incur those costs. And then phase 3 is the forecast. So we kind of did a forecast about 2.5 years out through fiscal year 2028. And so going through that process, we noticed that there's what we call a structural operating deficit, basically recurring, take away capital spending and other things, just recurring operations of the district. The costs incurred are exceed revenues from property taxes and sales taxes and interest income and other sources of funding. By about, we say 48 to 64 million over that period. I know Adam and the district have a different number, but it's still a healthy difference. And of course, the largest expense you have is payroll. Given you're in the business of teaching students, so it takes a lot of people to do that. So payroll right now runs about 65% of your revenues. By the end of our forecast, it'll be approaching 70. And one of the reasons that's the case is because revenues are kind of, property tax rose a little bit, but I think in this case, it may even decline a little bit this year coming up. But sales tax, the same thing. So generally, costs are going up more than revenues is what's driving that difference. And then on cash, the forecast shows that cash has fallen from about 100 million in February to roughly 53 million at the end of fiscal 26. That, again, forecasted, maybe, I'm sure it's a different number than what I have, to about 14 million at the end of fiscal 27, and then turning negative at the end of fiscal 28. And in between all that, there's some dips of negative months, negative cash months. But what I want to make sure that everybody understands is that forecast is kind of I'm gonna call it a straight line forecast. It doesn't correct for any, it's not making any assumptions about, well, we're we're going to cut this much out of our budget, we're going to raise revenues this much. We did adjust for known revenue changes, like when Adam, Mr. Neighbors says that, oh, well, property taxes are expected to come in 3% less. Well, we factored that into the forecast, but we didn't, other than that, it's just like if nothing else changes, this is where you're headed. And so that's the important thing I want everybody to understand about that exercise. It's not saying that you're going this way. It's just saying if nothing else changes, you might be heading in that direction. So, and I know that throughout all these reports, that the administration, we provided preliminary reports and preliminary suggestions, and the district, Mr. Neighbors, Dr. Orling, they've acted on those recommendations. And so some of those, to lay them out, is, we've mentioned that, the district should move from year-end adjustments to more monthly or quarterly, at least, adjustments to be able to monitor year-round, all these operating funds. They've moved to separate the bond millage, the debt sinking fund millage payments into a separate bank account. I realize that the bond covenants may not require that, but just this makes it very clean and clear that money is put aside for another use. And then, locking board-approved budgets in the system, which I'm sure there are mechanisms to be able to do that. And then charging payroll, to the extent that payroll is incurred by different funds, charging that payroll directly to that fund at the time the payroll is incurred, and not wait till a year end to true everything up. And then lastly, adding detailed project level reporting for construction projects. So that way, where, this is how much the project cost or supposed to cost. This is where we've spent so far. This is how much, has been completed from a percent complete standpoint, so that everybody has an understanding of where the budget versus actual and the construction projects are. And then and then along those lines, the board has also at least authorized, sales tax bonds for $30 million and revenue anticipation notes for $35 million, which will address the short-term cash needs over the next 18 to 24 months. And so those are real important. They'll be able to help the district manage these dips while they wait for the big lump sum payment in property taxes in January and February. And so, lastly, just want to say that that financing is, you've still got a structural operating deficit that'll need to be addressed, but that financing, the notes, gives you flexibility and time to do that and do it, correctly and not haphazardly. And so, that's for the board and the administration, the community. Those are your decisions. And lastly, just all those options are under review, and so I'll close there. And if you have any questions about anything in the reports, like I said, I'll do the best to answer them here. If I can't, then I will take them back, research, and get you an answer soon.
Any comments, questions, concerns?
I really just have a comment about, thank you for making the point about the need for the forensic audit, because that was a lot of our initial questions. We were under the impression that was the road we were having to take. So thank you for clarifying why we did not have to take that road.
Yeah, sure.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for everything else, but specifically that. Thank you.
No, when you said that helped me understand a lot.
Yeah.
Just that one line you stated, I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no worries.
Can that be found in your written report?
Yeah, should be in phase 2.
Phase 2 references no misappropriation of funds,
Yeah,
but
also.
the trigger part is what you're referring to.
The trigger
right?
would be, had we found that.
That we would have had a forensic
And I think
audit.
it's important that be included in the report, the written report, because a lot of people's going to read this report, and those who read it will say, well, the purpose of the audit was not a forensic audit, and therefore it does not provide that kind of information. But what you're saying is there was a trigger, and the trigger was never pulled.
Correct,
So,
correct.
And it's important that that be in the written document.
I'll
So
have to see
if
we
the
can do
document
that.
can be revised to include that, I'd like to see that happen.
Okay.
Agreed.
Yeah, just because, at least for the benefit of all of us, feeling very
Correct.
strongly about that portion of this
Oh.
conversation.
Okay, yeah, Adam, Mr. Neighbor, sorry, found that at page 2 of phase 2, it's the second paragraph from the bottom, the
What
last
does it say?
sentence.
Read it for me, Adam.
It says, "Our findings did not indicate potential misappropriation of funds, and we did not expand our scope related to potential misappropriation of funds."
However, had we found.
Yeah.
Had we found this, it would have triggered.
A forensic
That's what I'm concerned about.
Okay.
That, just that one sentence.
Yeah.
Means a lot.
No, it does. I agree. Thank you.
Okay.
Did,
Mr. Superintendent, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, go
Okay,
ahead.
buddy. The cash flow analysis that this, and I'm assuming this was the annual summary part of it, right?
Yeah.
And you, I know you mentioned, you must have done it by month over that to 28, because you found some months that are gaps. Is that spreadsheet or whatever software, is that something that y'all provided to?
Did, yeah.
I guess the reason I'm asking is so that we can use that as a baseline, a foundation, and then as we chip away at things that we're not going to reinvent the wheel? Is that-
Right, yeah, no.
I mean, I'm assuming if you did it, and he has it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a copy of that.
All right. That's all.
Did you want to say something, Mr.
So
Superintendent?
just kind of to wrap it up, obviously you see from the recommendations of the 3 phases, the district has moved forward with those recommendations. We're codifying them in policy 3, policy and procedures at this particular board meeting. Another batch coming at our next board meeting. So it'll be the second reading of these, first reading of our investment ones, which also includes additional internal controls, something you were referring to earlier, Mrs. Smith, with technology, having dual authentication and approval of transfer of funds and selling of equities that are identified in our savings firms. So there is more to come. We feel confident in our plan moving forward relative to our fiscal stability plan as well. So we feel like we have a pretty good plan moving forward. We can rest assured that we're going to follow the recommendations made by Eisner-Amper, continuing to work on policy and procedures as well as a primary manual for the entire business office. So thank you, Ms. Smith.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Mr. Neighbors, anything you want to inject? Any
Not
board
at-
member?
not at this
If
time.
not, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Motion? Motion, second?
I was like,
We
I'll
stand
move,
adjourned.
but we still have more agenda items.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, we didn't do all of them. We didn't consent all of them. We did have.
We have 2
I'm
more.
sorry.
Move to adjourn
The
from
salary
this
schedule.
one item.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Tom, for coming.
Thank you, sir.
We have D&E.
Salary schedule.
All right, salary schedule. And Ms. Brown's going to come up and join me as well. Just as everyone knows, every year, the board is required to adopt an annual salary schedule outlining the various positions, the rates of compensation, and various steps involved. As you're also well aware, a couple years ago, this salary schedule was overhauled a pretty good bit to change up our alignment in terms of how things in professional and classified positions track against various teacher salaries and things. So this 26-27 book is a continuation of that process. There's 2 documents attached to you for your review. Obviously, the first biggest one is the actual PDF of the book that you have in front of you. It kind of lays out all of the various schedules and compensation guides in terms of what positions are at what levels and things of that nature. But the other attachment is more in terms of the details of exactly what changed between the 25-26 version and the 26-26 or 26-27 version. So rather than go through page by page of the actual salary book itself, I did want to kind of go through some of the highlights using the changes document, and then we can kind of go from any sort of questions as we go through the book from there. Talking about some of the various changes for this fiscal for 26-27. 27. We did have some movements in regards to certain positions themselves, all of which were presented to the board in past actions, or at least various discussions. Some of the positions that were added this most recent for this next fiscal are the Executive Director of Equity and Student Services, the Director of Counseling, Mental Health, and Student Support, a ELL instruction technology coach, the coordinator of assistive technology and instructional support for complex needs, and the director of child welfare and attendance. Not all of these are brand new positions. Some of them are realignment or as of requests from the various departments and or SPED reviews and or the consolidation of other positions. And you'll see some of that in a little bit. Additional, we have the revision to the LPAC operation procedures in terms of some of those personnel positions. 2 of them were renamed and 2 of them were restructured with very little minimal cost to the district in terms of overall, as well as there were some positions that when we were reviewing with HR, we noted a few positions that were tracked to the teacher pay scale, but were not directly included in the book. So there was 3 that we noted that we felt needed to be included just for transparency and clarity, and those positions are listed here for your review and included in the pages. So without going into full detail, I do want to give you a heads up of this is the positions that were added for the visibility of the book for this next fiscal year and their salary structure. On the flip of that is the removals. We're not officially removing these, from our salary schedule per se, just because of there's not a current member or employee in those positions, or there's not a current need for those positions. I have moved them from the visibility in the book. So they do exist if those positions need to be revisited and maybe clarified in the future. But for the purposes of this 26-27 structure, having additional page when there was no one allotted to it did not seem to make sense in terms of visibility. So these are some of the positions that we have, in so many words, removed, but not completely eliminated from our salary schedule. Those positions are the lead agency, early childhood family center liaison, commercial refrigeration kitchen equipment technicians, executive director of child welfare and student services, and executive director of equity and student support, director of early childhood education, director of student services, the coordinator of Title I, and the Ready Start program director. Some of those removals, if you will, are because of the consolidation we talked about in the additions, some of those kind of realignments, if you will, or rename in some of the structure. So again, let's not think of those as true removals. They're just not currently occupied, so they were not included in the book. Okay? Any questions about the position structure that's going to be modified? Just for the note, a note for the board, in previous versions of this book, a lot of the changes were always about the pay raises or one-time payments or things of that nature. Because of where we're at right now, that was not discussed because that is not something that the board is actioning on at this time. Okay?
And just for clarity, the names on 32 and 33. Just double check. The salary thing I don't think changes, just the position name.
The title of a community
Page
engagement
32
coordinator.
should be multimedia. I think it's multimedia communications coordinator.
Okay.
Double check me on that. And then 33, I think, is public information coordinator, I believe. And then the other one is community engagement coordinator. But double check me. Just,
We can make notes for that
I
for
know
the
we
next cycle.
Just wanted to point out for them, as they know.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Okay. So just for the purposes of the board, the first half is basically position-based all the way through page 82. So the first basically 70 to 80 pages are position by positions, where it really lays out the schedule and professional, classified, executives, the various departments. From page 82 backwards, that's where we talk about the supplementary and ancillary provisions that are also included for additional pay or additional assignments of things of that nature. There were some revisions to that this year, some additional, and let's start with the first on page 82. Co-curriculars are various stipends paid for athletic or other extracurriculars, where things of, we could provide additional forms of compensation for them. There were a few added for this cycle, some of which at the high school level, where the girls flag football head coach and assistant coach, as well as a bowling assistant coach. They were in place for 25 and 26, but they just were added to the official schedule. This schedule actually codifies those and puts them officially in the book. Mr. Dwayne Foray has been working very closely with payroll to make sure those have been appropriately documented. Also at the middle school level, the head coach of powerlifting and the head coach of wrestling. These, again, were a matter of transparency and making sure that they were included in the book appropriately. They were operated under this past fiscal year. Additionally, moving forward, as you move past these co-curricular pages, you also can see on page 84, we added a timeline. There had been some questions and concerns mentioned about, when do those coaches get those types of payments? So again, working with Mr. Foray, we were able to develop a payment schedule to make sure that everyone involved in fall sports winter sports as well as spring sports, have the ability to see exactly when those types of stipends will be paid out on the annual and/or semi-annual basis. Any questions before I keep going?
I guess, and maybe, so the requirement per se for these, if there are any requirements per these co-curriculars or criteria, let me say, not, maybe criteria is the right word, that they have to meet to get X stipend, is that in maybe the job description of that co-curricular? I'm looking at all y'all because I don't know for them to reach that, or is it in here? Is it in another document per se? Like if they have to play some games or they got to practice, whatever that criteria is.
There are some guidelines. There are guidelines in place. I am not closest to that work, but we can follow up. But there are guidelines, and there is an agreement in place that is signed with these employees that do receive these stipends. But I want to make sure that we follow up and give you the exact information.
Right. I know there are. I just didn't know if it has to be in here. You'll probably
So we have, if you recall, we have already established certain criteria for our arts programs and so many practices. So now, since the middle school athletics, that is being developed, we'll have a similar process where when they sign their job description is when they will sign off specifically on that. If you would like it referenced somewhere in the salary book, we certainly can for the next time, but I feel we have a process right now in place, if that's good. Okay.
No, I'm not requesting being in here at all. I was
Yes, sir.
asking if it's already in whatever they signed, then that.
Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure it's mentioned.
Now, I don't know specifically if the newest ones have been, but I know that Mr. Rogers, Mr. Foray, they're working on it.
I wouldn't put in two places.
Mr.
You gotta
Roman, if you
remember
could just
changing
make a
two
note of
places.
that to follow up with Mr. Rogers. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
These schedules in terms of the middle schools, in terms of the tiers, there are some guidelines in terms of what tier qualifies for what in terms of assignment, number of practices, number of students, et cetera. So there are some behind the scenes details on those.
Yeah, no reason for two places.
Okay, going past that, once you get past 84, that's really when you start getting into some of the part-time positions. These are some again, some high-level modifications. We modified some of the language regarding the long-term sub for bus operators based on best practices and recommendations that were made by transportation. We've removed the before and after care cafeteria worker line item just because that's been operated in-house through our child nutrition alignment instead of individual personnel. And then we also address some of the student worker progression. There's some more details further back in the book that we just kind of wanted to reference here in terms of what qualifies for first year, second year, third year. So there's some additional language in the back of the book for that. Okay. Once you get past 86, you really start getting into the other stipends. This is where you start getting into the mentors and the professional development and all of the various stipends of that nature. And this is where I had Ms. Teresa Brown go into a lot more detail and working with our executive directors and principals to really kind of refine and revise some of the opportunities to make sure that they were really on task with what we were expecting and what was the in so many words, the cost benefit of those types of arrangements and making sure that we're including the approval requirements, making sure the chain of approval is clarified, making sure that the budgets and the multiple presenters language is updated for current practices. So we did a lot of work, or Ms. Brown did a lot of work from page 88 forward or backward to really kind of refine and use her the best practices to tweak and refine some of those changes over the course of this next fiscal year's expectations. So you can kind of see some of the language in the changes document talked about. The mentor teacher student residence language has been updated for the new approved board format that was brought before the board in the last few months. Some of the changes in the meetings and professional development, things about the approval and the presentation guidelines, the school test coordinator parenthetical was removed. There's a lot of little one-offs in terms of some of the various language and opportunities that were refined so that they meet our current best practices and expectations for this next year. But like I said, and try not to go through every single detail. I just want to give you some high level. So the back of the book is about stipends and AWAs. And I did want to mention at least a couple more things. There is the last two bullets on the changes document really talks about the work that Ms. Brown has been doing about additional work agreements and the extended employment guidelines, which she's really been putting a lot of effort to really start refining and updating our language so that there's a lot more approval processes and the timesheet process and the budget process is truly adhered to so that before all that information comes down to payroll, that everything is basically in line and approved by the various personnel as at the executive as well as possible superintendent level. So that the back of the book, in so many words, has been updated to reflect those changes.
And I'll just say this, kudos to the work that's being taking place with HR and the business office, but we talked about tightening our belts. We talked about refining processes. This has allowed us, provided the opportunity to do that. So I do appreciate the work because I know it's a lot when you look at positions and stipends and what we have traditionally done. But credit, our executive team and everybody that they work with to really refine those things so that everyone is being compensated for what they are required to do that really goes outside the scope of their particular work. I just think that we're in a much tighter space now than we were before. So thank you for leading that work.
Thanks for actually providing the book.
Okay. Let's move right along if there are no further questions. Moving right along to the interim budget.
All right. Next to last item on the list for me tonight is the interim budget for this next fiscal year. As we've been reviewing, again, at board retreat and various other discussions, this is, again, the updated version of where we're at for this next projected fiscal year. We've reviewed this in detail in the past in terms of the various changes in revenues, changes in expenditures, and things of that nature. But the one thing I did want to point was obviously the financing options that we have gone through in terms of the approval that the board authorized 2 weeks ago. You can see both of those options clearly presented in the general fund other sources items. You can see the 30 and the 35 coming in, as well as the anticipated interest costs of about 1.2 going out. The additional sales tax interest cost is presented over in the special revenue funds as well. So you can see at a very high level, this is a detailed process, and you do have a physical copy for your perusal as well in terms of being able to see those things side by side and work across the pages in terms of how those things line up in terms of the comparatives that we've been talking about, how those columns work, how those details work in terms of the summary, how you get into the details of where those accounts and where those numbers come from as you get further and further in the book. I'm not going to recap the entire message one more time here, but if you will, the message in the front of the book really recaps exactly where we're at and where this next fiscal year plans to be. It emphasizes where we're at in terms of the revenue structure. It also emphasizes where we're at in terms of the efforts that have been made through the expenditure side to really kind of tighten our belts, as Dr. Orling mentioned, and try to refine the areas that we have control over, if you will. But you can obviously see where the salaries and benefits portion continues to be, even despite our best practices, we will need to make some additional review, which is already underway with our position by position analysis. So again, you can kind of touch on the high levels here in terms of where the information that you've seen in the last few weeks. This is really kind of summarizing all those discussions and putting it into the final document for you. I didn't want to go through every page line by line, just again, but if anybody has any questions, I'm here to answer them. I think I've addressed hopefully most of the concerns as previously communicated.
I just wanted to communicate, I've heard from several constituents over the last couple of weeks, and their biggest concerns are on the expense side. And I just wanted to share that. And I did explain what we've been cutting, and gave them most recent updated amount of, I think it was last Friday. So just to make sure I share that information and communicate that those are their concerns. So thank you.
And we will continue, obviously last week we didn't provide that financial update. We had some people that were out, and this is obviously summertime where different people, but we'll have the latest savings relative to our position analysis in this week's newsletter to the board.
And for clarity, I did explain the process, what we're doing, how much we've cut, each thing's being reviewed. So I didn't just leave it as is.
There are no further questions, comments, criticisms? Then I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
and so this is unusual for me. I would like to welcome Ms. McMillan and Miss Eleni. Yep, Kapowski. I'm not going to get it right, so I'm going to say Miss Eleni. Yes, glad to have you here today with us. So take it away.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. Yes, we are fortunate to have Mr. Kapowski here. We've had a close working relationship with him throughout the session, and I know Mr. Kapowski has submitted a final report for you overall with the session. Just to kind of give you an overview from the school system perspective, we looked at basically around 150 bills on just the House side alone. Out of those, 63 are now acts. They have been put into law. There's still 7 outstanding that are with the governor right now, waiting to see, does he sign, does he veto, or do those become law without signature? On the Senate side, it looked like we had about 73 bills over the course of session.
Regina and Darnisha for their help. Sometimes your acronyms are a little confusing. So we were in constant contact, Ken, everyone, nonstop. But we probably had, like I say quite often, a lot of what goes on in the legislative process is redundant. Maybe to some people, the elected officials file a bill because they're asked by a constituent, to file something, or a school board or a business or industry. A lot of times not everything percolates up to, okay, we have a problem. But we did have a few this year. We had the behavioral health bill, which Ms. Van Hoven was very, very, very helpful. I've learned all about educational IEPs. I've learned more. I know the nuances of how you file complaints, okay? But we had a few bills. One, I'll go through, I would probably consider the 3 or 4 that were the top issues. One was Representative Knox's bill, which made it out of the House as burden of proof being put back on the school system to show that in special education delivery programs, the EIP, it was the tutelage, the coursework, and the education, the care and plan was being implemented in accordance with what the plan dictated. So I would imagine, no matter what happens, especially in K through 12, you're always going to have cases where a parent may not feel they were being served, and their children were being served in the manner that they thought correct. A bill was filed where the burden of proof to show, again, that it was being implemented correctly, made it out of the House with overwhelming support, okay? At first, after reviewing it first, it wasn't, we were sort of neutral on it. And then neighboring parish in Jefferson at the Capitol, one of their school board members used to be a senator, and a friend of mine brought it up to our attention and said, wait, you really got to look at this and really kind of dig down into it. We did oppose the bill, as did numerous other school boards and districts, but I don't really think the School Board Association nor LASC really took a firm position on it. It was St. Charles, Jefferson, Orleans. We understood that the bill was going to be called left on the calendar when it went over to the Senate side, meaning it's just going to sit there and sit and sit and sit. Well, bill came up and we were in the Capitol they were every day, but bill came up on the Senate, and the Senate president said, return to the calendar. And the senator from New Orleans went up, totally unbeknownst to us, and had a conversation with the Senate president, pulled it from the calendar and had it heard. It totally came out of left field. I spoke with the senator after, and I said, I thought that bill was going to be left on the calendar, had a quick conversation. And he said no one from the parish, from Orleans, reached out to him to speak, to just leave it alone. I think there was a communication issue there. I did, as it relates back to St. Charles, and I do quite often, and Dr. Ortley knows this, and Regina, a lot of times bills may have effects on on school boards and education, maybe for not St. Charles Parish. Sometimes there's different conditions and set of contexts. My heart goes out to, I know where my family's from. My heart goes out to school districts that can't find school teachers or people to drive buses. I understand that. But we looked at some of the results, and I think we only had like 4 complaints out of some outrageous number. So rather than, go through a whole procedural parliamentary, process of calling the bill back down and we kind of made a judgment call. We'll just see how this kind of works out. Second was a bill filed by Senator Stuart Cathy, real good guy from around Monroe, and it had to do with the ability for school districts, schools, to call a vote to see if they want to explore becoming a charter, but there was no minimum of floor. It was just, let's say we sent out we had a vote and 10 parents showed up, and 6 said yes. Well, then it would become a charter school. I know how that sounds at first. I had to read it and reread it. I said, this can't be. There's just no way. We deal with hundreds and hundreds of issues across varied special interest, and this was one that I just couldn't believe that could happen. We worked that really hard, and that bill ended up being just kind of parked and nothing came about it. The other one was Representative Mack, who's from around the I-12 Livingston, Tangipahoa area, had a bill, and it ended up passing, and again, Ms. Van Hoven was incredibly helpful. But that bill dealt with access from third-party, out-of-school behavioral therapists, access to the classroom, and sort of putting, I would like to have said guardrails, but it was really the opposite. It was allowing more and greater access. At the beginning, it was just sort of a free-for-all. It appeared to me just sort of a free-for-all that you could have outside consultants 8 hours in a classroom all day long with little Billy. And I asked the author, who's a really good fella, Representative said, well, what if 3 children have 3 therapists, or 2, or 4, or 5? Well, I didn't think about that. Well, the bill ended up, we worked on the language again, Regina and Ken and Mindy and everyone was very, very, very helpful. And getting some language down on that did end up, in the end, putting up some guardrails and things that I would imagine school boards, not only St. Charles, others could adapt to and live with. I don't think that's going to be the last of that. I think, you got to realize that is a business, and sometimes, I'll say it, not sometimes, very, very often I call those vendor bills. So while it is children, okay, it is a private business, trying to get greater access to the classroom because you bill federal government hourly. So vendor bills are just the nature of the beast. It's part of what happens. Sometimes it's very hard to explain to a legislator. I know it says children, but let's just let me explain. But I think overall, again, it was just a lot of help from everyone here and staff and Ken and everyone. I'm learning more acronyms, but it's slow. I never would have made it in the Navy, okay? But if y'all have any questions, again, I apologize. I just drove in from Alabama this afternoon. Long day. If y'all have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. And y'all all have my cell phone. You can call me anytime. Oh, and then I'm sorry, most important, the governor's moved to reduce the MFP to make up for the $168 million, give or take, for teacher pay raises. There was an injunction filed, I believe, in Baton Rouge. I think it was couple of parishes, not us, but
It
saying, I'd
was
like Ken.
not Parrish, right, it was Leslie Jacobs, former Bessie member, Mike Falk, former executive director of LAS, Dr. Belinda Davis, who's a current professor at LSU, but former Bessie member. Those are the three, and maybe one more person from New Orleans.
A school board member from Orleans.
From school board member from
And from
Orleans.
Orleans.
So those are the four plaintiffs currently.
Yeah, so that was filed, I believe, on June 18th. And so I guess a legal question, and staff could probably unpack this better than I can, but the idea is, does the governor have the authority to alter the MFP formula to do this? Is it an overreach? So I think we're waiting, part of the timing on this is you want to get past the line item veto that the governor has for your projects back home.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're Representative so-and-so from, Apple Valley, and you have a little bridge and you really been wanting that bridge, politics is not a fun business sometimes. So it's a procedural issue to get past a certain date to,
I thought it was very, Mr. Neighbors and I were both up there when the Legislative Audit Committee met. Tuesday, Wednesday, one of those days, Tuesdays.
and there's all this money.
And, everyone was coming to the table and talking and saying how much this is going to hurt their school system. And, if you do this, then we're not even going to have a rainy day. And Mr. Neighbors will agree with me. That chair, and I told this to Dr. Ortling, was like, we're not in the business to worry about rainy day funds. That's not what we're here for. And and everybody was just kind of like, if we get pulled, we will have, and there was one parish, was it Kennesaw?
Caldwell.
And he was saying that this will destroy us, that if our funds are not given, that we will lose, we will have to cut this numerous amount of positions. And it was just amazing to me because I felt as though that many of them walked in and their mind was already made up because of the fact of the governor, and they got to keep these projects and their hands were kind of tied. So it was just a very, not surprising, but another eye-opening event that I attended to, how political it is.
Yeah, you hear, well, we don't want to take money out of the classroom. Well, okay, but you still have to put gas in the bus, and you have to pay the insurance, and you got to pay the light bill, and
Well, they received a document that was based on not this year fund balances, but last year. So a lot of these parishes were showing these fund balances that were high, and the chairman kept saying, but you have this much money, and everybody kept saying, but that was 24, 25, it's not 25. So it was, they didn't even know how to look at the document that was given to them. And they all admitted that. Am I correct, Mr. Neighbors, that they all said, we need a class just on trying to understand this information of what we're receiving, because they didn't even know how that spreadsheet worked. So it was a great, great learning experience.
And I would imagine next year's budget that has been crafted is crafted with the intention of full MFB funding. Am I right?
Correct.
And we're not the only school board. I'm saying everyone has already said, well, here's our budget, and here's how many teachers, and you know more about this than I do, I would imagine. Yeah.
And I was just coming to clarify just a little bit more about Ms. Weber said, and that was the position of a lot of the panel was, in so many words, the document they provided said, okay, well, this is what you have, and there was some clarity of, okay, well, this parish shows X amount, and this parish shows Y amount. Well, why is there such a difference between the two? And it's not that the accounting rules are, in so many words, loose about that, but the boards have some discretion about how they do classify things. And there's some ways that the boards, specifically the school boards, can take action to, in so many words, commit things. And the more you commit, the less you have in what they refer to as unrestricted. And so the report that the legislative auditor was focusing on was these unrestricted balances that because of some accounting things of that nature, that these parishes in so many words had said, okay, well, you've got all this unrestricted money, you should be good to be able to pay for whatever this change is going to be. But that was, as Ms. Weber said, that was almost 12 months ago, and in some cases, because some of them didn't even have 25 audit results 24 months ago in terms of where their financial position was. So a lot of the information being presented was by the panel, they weren't clear as to what they were exactly looking at, as she said, but some of the information was just old in terms of like where we're at, because our position that was presented is nowhere near the position that we're looking at right now, as this board is fully aware. So if they pulled us and they said, okay, well, this is what your numbers show, I'm going to say, okay, well, this is where I'm going to actually end up this year. You tell me, do you think we're in the same exact position? So it was a lot of good information, and it was very interesting to hear a lot of the school boards try to present their positions, but it was interesting to see the representatives and senators' responses to, well, this is what we have.
Yeah, I think it's also, and Lenny knows this better than anybody, is what I've said after we've gone through what we've gone through, and the term cash flow came up, right? And we get compared to and school boards in each parish get compared to their parish. School board's fiscal year ends June 30th. Most of the parishes, at least the ones I've looked up, their fiscal years end December 31st. Well, our big deposits come in January. So if those general fund balances are June 30th, and the only thing you're getting beyond that I've learned here, sitting in this seat, is you're only getting those sales tax deposits. Well, your expenses are really more than the sales tax deposits. So you get that ad valorem in January, and you have to, it's got to last you through the year, right?
Budget, right.
Yeah, so cash flow wise, if you really look at cash flow, the expenses exceed what that sales tax is. You see what I'm saying? So really, if you say I've got 50 million, well, take my general fund balance December 31st, it's not 50 million.
Right.
It might be 25. This is going to vary district to district, right? And I think that's something that maybe I don't think I looked at it, I mean, as well through that lens until the last 6 months here in this seat. Mm-hmm. And I could definitely articulate to any other legislator or anybody.
And it's like any business. I mean, it's the same thing. Your revenues may come in at a certain point in time, mm-hmm. but that's when you get the check, but mm-hmm. It's allocated over 12 months. And yeah, we're dealing with this with another client with the state self-insured health plan of how a little segment of time, when is the review? Mm-hmm. Well, here's the review. Well, that's not the 12 months. That's just this little snapshot.
And there was a senator that was not aware of that the fiscal year in school systems was July 1st through June 30th. She did not know that. And she asked for clarification of that. And she goes, is everyone like that? And everybody went, yeah, every school system in the state of Louisiana.
That's an opportunity to tie the cash flow in as to that one right there.
Well, everybody did.
And I wasn't there, I'm just.
No, everybody did. Everybody.
They did.
Okay.
Yeah, they did.
Just,
Who did speak did make that point.
so just to kind of catch everybody up where this currently is now, as Ms. Kapowski said, is basically in the court's hands right now, whether or not it moves forward. Obviously, there's going to be an appeal by the governor's personnel. I am in close contact with this whole group that is pushing this forward. As you may have heard, LAST did not officially sign on board with it, although we are against everything. In talking to many other systems, the fear of from their legislators had a lot to do with it. However, we're all in support of voting no for this particular veto. And then today, the Louisiana Federation of Teachers also came out against it. So every major education professional organization has come out against this veto. So we'll see where it lands. I'm hearing from some legislators that they feel is not going to stand up to the Louisiana Supreme Court, but we shall see. I think that's the information that they've been provided by the other side. So as Mr. Krause said, if it can get past the line item veto piece, then that'll at least give our opinion, some legislators to cover that they would need to abstain or not vote. So more to come. On the flip side, if it is passed, we are pushing pretty hard to allow flexibility for systems, if we have to pay towards the end of the calendar year for school systems such as us that are relying on that December check. Also encouraging other things to look at for systems that have implemented pay raises and or stipends in previous years. So the LASSA organization worked with the governor's representative to conduct a survey of all school systems, and in that survey identify whether or not a stipend and or pay raise was provided by that school system in the past 3 years. So Mr. Neighbors completed that survey. What's to come of that, we shall see. But as I keep on professing, what about these systems such as this school system that has invested in teacher compensation, be given any consideration for not, obviously in this particular time, we are not prepared to do so, but obviously over a period of time, this board has shown its investment in educators. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And I do want to thank Mr. Kapowski, because I do feel as though this was one of our most successful legislative sessions working together with with Mr. Kapowski and the Magnolia consultants.
Magnolia. We did change, the parent company, we're the
I know you
Magnolia
have changed.
Group now.
So I do find, though, that our staff in working with him, and I'll see Ms. Smith back there, she also was an important part of that. We really felt that we made a difference this year. We wanted to go in this session making a difference. I felt, especially with the behavior bill, we were able to do so, and we were really able to influence other bills from either not being heard or heard. And we come with a certain level of recognition now at the Capitol with those other major professional organizations. They want us on board with those discussions and very appreciative of our help. So
Thank you.
I appreciate the work that you guys are doing.
Thank y'all it's a privilege to work with y'all, it really is. I take K through 12 very, very seriously, and the more that I've worked with y'all, I realize just the effort it takes to run such a fine system. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
This is for committee meeting only. So thank you, Ms.
All right.
McMillan.
Thank y'all.
Appreciate it.
And y'all can call me anytime. All right. See y'all guys.
Before we adjourn, consent items 2C, 3A, B, and F, which were referenced earlier by Mr. Suffren. Does anybody have objection? Resolution?
The canvassing, that's on there. A, B,
The canvassing, I don't know.
3, A, B, and F. It's
We
on
can-
there. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have to take the canvassing off?
Wait, I thought you just meant to move it to.
That's what they're saying. Okay.
Well, the action has to be taken. The whole thing doesn't have to be
The
read.
action.
Pull it up.
Okay, so we pull that out. So we're putting 2C, which is, let me find my, thank you. And then 3A and 3F. Everybody good with that?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Now.
Sorry.
Oh, and don't forget to be here 6 o'clock.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, 6 o'clock tomorrow for the budget hearing.
And if I could, Mr. President,
Yep.
so just in case there are any visitors, we will be prepared, both Mr. Cody and myself have reviewed, prepared remarks. If there's any news media potentially here, we're prepared for that. Additionally, we'll have the cards ready. Just remember, it's still a public hearing meeting, so they have an opportunity to speak on the item, and that is it. If there are more people here than the 30 minutes, then the board can decide to continue past the 30 per policy, whatever your recommendation would be.
Okay, thank you. Move to adjourn?
Second.